Hi, I'm Nikki from Find Me Crafting. It's time to add another animal to the Cuddle Buddies Baby Blanket. Last month we put on this super cute cow. This month I have the step-by-step tutorial for adding the super cute Calico kitten. Each month I'm putting out a new free pattern for this blanket so that by the end of the year the entire blanket is done. And you can obviously put these appliques anywhere else you can think of. A hat, a bag, use your imagination. Come on, I'll show you how. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss any new patterns or projects. I'm working with Hobby Lobby's I Love This yarn in Ivory. Yes, right now this is all I have of this yarn, so we're playing a bit of yarn chicken today. Latte and black. I will be using a G 4mm hook. And I'm going to start with the head since that's the largest piece of the cat. So I'm going to start with a magic circle. If you have any difficulties with magic circles, I'm going to put a link up here in the right hand corner for a tutorial that'll walk you through step by step and a little bit slower in case you need any help or refreshing on how to do a magic circle. It's also called a magic ring. So I've wrapped my yarn around my fingers like this. I'm going to reach through, grab my yarn up like that. I'm going to chain one to lock it in place. And now within my magic circle, I'm going to work over both of these pieces of yarn and I'm going to do 8 single crochets. So I go down, pull up a loop. I have 2 loops on, yarn over and pull through. That's 1. Down, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I am going to pull on my yarn tail here to tighten this up. So now I'm going to slip stitch to my first single crochet, not the chain over here kind of on the side. We want to do it under the first single crochet. So I'm going to go underneath both loops, yarn over and pull that under the loops and under the loop on my hook. I'm going to chain 1. And now I'm ready for row 2 because that was row 1. Just so you know, you can tighten up the center of that magic circle. It's going to open up a little bit as you work, but at the end when we're done making the head, when we weave in this end, I will show you how to weave it in so that it locks that magic circle shut and it's never going to come open again. So if this opens while you're working, don't worry about it at all. So in row 2, we're going to do 2 single crochets into each of the stitches. I'm going to go down under the same stitch that I just slip stitched to. I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through. So that's 1 single crochet. Now in the same stitch, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go down, pull up a loop. I've got 2 loops on, yarn over, pull through. So that's 2 stitches underneath that 1 stitch. So in the next stitch, I'm going to do the same thing. 2 more single crochets in the same stitch. I'm going to do that all the way around, giving me a total of 16 single crochets for this row. Okay, I'm back to where I started. I'm going to slip stitch under that first single crochet, just like I did in the last row, and chain 1. That sets me up for row 3. In row 3, I'm going to do 2 stitches under this first stitch, then 1 in the next, then 2, then 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, all the way around. So under that same stitch that I just slip stitched to, I'm going to go down, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through. That's 1 in the same stitch. I'm going to do another single crochet. And now in the next stitch, just 1. Now I'm going to do 2 single crochets under this one and 1 in the next. If you continue that around, you will end up with 24 single crochets in this row. I am back to where I started. I am once again going to slip stitch under my first single crochet and chain 1. We're now ready for row 4. So we're going to do a pattern here. We're going to do 1 under this first stitch, then 2 under this stitch, and then 1 under the next stitch. And now we're going to repeat this repeat. So do 1, then 2 stitches here, and then 1. Whoops, I dropped my yarn. And then 1, 2 in this stitch. I think I just missed that stitch. Yep. And 1. So 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, all the way around. You will have 32 stitches in this row. And back to where I started, I'm going to slip stitch under the first single crochet and chain 1. Now in round 5, our next round, we want to add this black splotch, this black coloration to the cat's head that will continue with the ear, but we need to add this black yarn in. So the pattern for row 5 is to do 2 in one stitch and then a single in 1, 2, 3. So 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. We're going to continue that pattern the entire time, but we're going to use the ivory yarn for just the first 25 stitches. So let's do that, and then we're going to switch it to black. So this first stitch will have 2, and then singles in 1, 2, and 3. So now we go back to a double, and then 1, 2, 3. So that's 10 stitches. I'm going to continue until I have finished, well, till I'm done with 24, and we're going to change it on the 25th. So I have finished 24 stitches in this row so far with my pattern, 2 and then single, 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 2, single, single, single. So I have 24 like that. In my 25th stitch, I am going to go down under the loops, pull up a loop. I now have 2 loops on. Normally you would finish by yarning over, pulling through, but I want to switch colors. So I'm going to switch to my black. So I'm going to lay my black kind of toward the back here. I'm going to use that as my yarn over and pull through. So now my 25th stitch is ivory, but I've switched to the black yarn. And now I'm going to repeat my pattern of 2 single, 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 just one time in the black. While you're doing that, you need to carry the ivory yarn because you're going to start back up with it to finish the row. So I'm going to hold my black yarn. I'm going to go down under this stitch, and I'm going to also go underneath the ivory. I'm going to hold it against the back here and just work over it as I go. So I'm going to yarn over and pull my black through, 2 loops on, yarn over, pull through. That's 1. Now I need to do a second stitch like that in this stitch. So go under, and I'm still going underneath my ivory yarn here, yarn over the black, 2 loops on, yarn over, pull through. Now I need to do 3 single crochets, 1 in each of the next 3 stitches. So underneath my loops, underneath my ivory yarn, 1 single crochet, next stitch under the loops, under the ivory yarn, and yarn over, pull through. Last stitch like this, I'm going to go down underneath, grab my black yarn. Now I'm going to switch back to the ivory. So I'm going to just drop the black. Do not carry it at this point. Just drop it to the back, leave it hanging there. We'll come back to it when we get back to the spot here. I'm going to yarn over and pull through with the ivory. So you should have 5 stitches in the black, but we're back to the ivory yarn, and we're going to repeat our repeat. So it's 2 more underneath this stitch, and then 1 under the next 3. 1, 2, 3. I have 1 more of that repeat, 2 here in this first stitch, and then 3 singles. So that's row 5. That's what it looks like with these 5 stitches in the black. There should be a total of 40 stitches, most of which are ivory, some of which are black. And we're going to single crochet under that first stitch. Maybe try not to drop your yarn while you're doing it. That would probably be helpful. And chain 1. Now in row 6, we're going to have a different repeat pattern. We are going to be adding in some black stitches right about here, but let's get going on the pattern first. I'm going to do 2 singles. So here's 1 in this stitch, 1 in the next stitch. Then I'm going to do 2 right here in this stitch, and then 2 more singles, single and single. So that's my repeat. single, single, double, single, 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 double, single, single. I'm going to do that with the ivory 5 times for a total of 30 stitches. So I have 29 stitches done in the ivory right here. On my 30th, I'm going to go underneath these black loops here, pull up the yarn, but I want to finish this with the black so I can switch to the black yarn. So I'm going to drop my ivory for just a second, pick up that black from where you dropped it before. I'm going to yarn over and pull through. So now I've switched to the black. You do have this little bit of stretch here of the black yarn where it's pulled across the back, but because we are attaching this face down onto a blanket or whatever you're putting this applique on, you will never see that. But we do need to carry the ivory yarn again behind. So as we work these black stitches, keep in mind that you have to have the ivory yarn held up on the back. And I'm going to go back to my pattern of going underneath the black loops and my ivory yarn, pull up the black. So there's a single, same thing in the next one where you're going underneath the ivory yarn. That's another single. I'm going to do a double here. So double, and then single, single. Now on your last single of that repeat of the black, I'm going to switch back to the ivory by just dropping my black, picking up my ivory to finish off that stitch. And now I'm going to finish this row in that same pattern with the ivory. So it's going to be another single, single, double, single, single. And then there will be one more repeat like that. Single, single, double, and then 2 singles. That gives me a total of 48 stitches in row 6, and that's actually the last row for the head. So we just need to slip stitch under our first single crochet and cut the yarn. You want to leave yourself a fairly long tail because you have to, we're going to use that to stitch the head onto the blanket. And I'm going to finish off by just pulling that yarn tail through. You can also cut your black yarns on the back. I like to tie those two together just to secure the black yarn. Don't pull too tight because it will buckle your cat head. In order to finish off that magic circle in the middle, like I mentioned before, let's weave in this end first. I'm going to put it on a yarn needle. I'm going to tighten it up. I'm on the back side right now of the head. I'm going to tighten it. And now you want to weave your yarn needle underneath the stitches of the magic circle itself. So you can see that my magic circle goes this way, like my yarn tail, if I pull it kind of to the left, it's tightening this up. So I'm going to go underneath these stitches going in a clockwise motion. And it's kind of tight because it's my first one. So I'm going to pull it through and just tighten it. And then I'm going to do that again, continuing around the circle. And that has completely shut that circle and it's not going to come loose again. I am going to weave this end in just a little bit more in the rows above it just to kind of get it out of the way. And there is our cat's head. Continuing on with what's left of my ivory yarn, I'm going to make the paws. I'm going to do a magic circle. Pull up a loop here. I'm going to chain 1 to secure it. And now working over both of these pieces of yarn, I'm going to do 6 single crochets. I just slip stitched under the first stitch and I chained 1. So now I'm going to do 2 single crochets into each stitch around. So that's 1, and in the same stitch here's 2, 3, 4. When you get back around to the start, you're going to want to slip stitch under your first single crochet. This is literally the end of my yarn. That's all I have left. But that is your paw. That is one paw completed, and you just need to weave in all of your ends. Now, ideally, if you didn't just lose at Yarn Chicken like I did, you would leave yourself a longer tail so that you can stitch this onto the blanket later on. I'm just gonna have to attach some yarn because I'm gonna have to go buy some first. But I did want to show you how to embroider on some claws. So you're gonna cut yourself some black yarn, and using your yarn needle, you're gonna thread that on. And I'm gonna work from the back. I'm coming up toward the center, well, a little off center. That hole in the middle is my center, so I'm coming just to the right of that. I'm gonna leave myself a tail on the back, and I'm just gonna come down to the back side like that. I'm gonna come up a little, like actually in the center, and down toward my edge. And then one more a little bit to the left of center. My yarn tail is getting in my way, and down toward the edge again. And if you don't like how it looks, feel free to just pull it out. No big deal. I usually have to do that a couple times before I like my embroidered pieces. Today I got lucky. I'm gonna just knot my starting tail and my ending tail, and one of my paws is complete. Now let's work on the cat's cheeks, or the muzzle, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to be using my Latte yarn and still my G 4mm hook. And I'm just going to do another magic circle. I'll pick up my yarn. I'm going to do a chain. And now I'm going to do 8 single crochets into the magic circle. So there's 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to pull on my yarn tail, my starting yarn tail, and pull that till my magic circle is tighter and closed. I'm going to slip stitch under the first single crochet and chain 1. Now I'm on to row 2. I'm going to do 2 single crochets into that first stitch, the one I just slip stitched to. So there's 1, and in the same stitch here's 2. In the next stitch I'm just going to do 1 single crochet. So now we go back to 2 in the same stitch and 1. And I'm going to repeat that pattern around 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 till I get back to the start. That will give me a total of 12 stitches. When you get back to the start, you're going to slip stitch under the first single crochet, just like we've been doing for all the other pieces, and you're done. That is 1 cheek. I am going to leave myself a longer yarn tail again because I'm going to use that to sew this on to the face later. I'm going to pull it through, and now I am going to weave in my ends and do that same technique that I did with the face to tighten up my magic circle so that it stays closed. And you need to make 2 of these for the cheeks / muzzle. I'm going to be making the ears. So I'm going to make 1 ear in the Latte yarn, 1 ear in black. I'm going to show you with the Latte yarn because it'll be easier to see. And I'm just going to chain 2, 1 and 2. Now this next stitch I'm going to put in the second chain from the hook. So here's where my hook goes, is in this loop. There's the first chain. Right here is the second chain. So I'm going to work a single crochet into that stitch, that chain. So there we go. There's 1 single crochet. I'm going to chain 1, and we're going to treat this like a row. So now I'm going to turn my work as if this 1 single stitch is a whole row, because for right now it is. I'm going to put 2 single crochets under that 1 stitch. So there's 1 and 2. I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to turn my work. And you can kind of see now this tiny little row here. That's what we're working on. There's only 2 stitches in that last row, but I'm going to do 2 stitches into each of them. So I'm going to go under the loops, pull up a loop, single crochet 1, now in the same stitch, single crochet 2, and in the next stitch, same thing, 2 single crochets, 1 and 2. It's a little bit easier now. You can see that little row. I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to turn my work as if I was going to work back along this row, but I'm not. I'm going to kind of flip it one more time and work up this diagonal side. So here's where I finished. I'm going to turn it. Here's where I would be going back along this row if I was doing that, but I'm not. And I'm just going to rotate slightly to work up the nearest side. This diagonal, they don't look like stitches at all, but we're going to put 4 single crochets along this edge. So just try to space them evenly because there really aren't stitches here. So there's 1, 2, oops, don't drop the yarn, 3, and 4. There we go. Now I'm in this top stitch. I'm calling it the top because it's at the top as I'm holding it. I'm going to put 3 more into that same stitch. So 1, 2, and 3. And in order to fit them, you kind of have to turn the work. Now you're facing this last side, and I'm going to put 3 single crochets down this side. So 1, 2, and 3. And you're done. It just gives you this rounded triangle look. I am going to slip stitch over here under the next stitch, the one that looks like the first stitch of that row. I'm going to slip stitch under there. I'm going to cut myself a length of yarn that's long enough that I can stitch this ear on later. And I'm going to finish it off. So that's what your ear looks like, this cute little rounded triangle. And then you just need to make another one in the black yarn. Once you have all of your pieces made, I want to show you how I go about attaching them to the blanket. I start by attaching the ears to the head before I sew anything onto the blanket itself. So I'm going to sew the black one on the right where I have the black patch on the head, and I'm going to sew the latte colored one on the left. I leave about 5 stitches empty between the two, and I'm going to stitch the ear onto the back of the head. So I'm going to start by attaching the black one because that one's easy to center up because you're just centering it up with the black spot that you have. You're going to put your yarn tail on your yarn needle, and I'm going to overlap the back of the head with about this first row here, and maybe a little bit more just so I like how it looks. And then I'm going to stitch back and forth between the two. So under this stitch of the ear and then the 2 loops here of the stitch on the front of the head. And I'm just going to go back and forth through those stitches until it's all attached. Once you get that attached, do not cut off this yarn. You're going to just leave it hanging because we're going to use that later to stitch the head onto the blanket. So then you just repeat the process about 5 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right about here, I'm going to sew on my other ear. Next, I want to attach both pieces of the cat's muzzle. I want to overlap them a little bit, so I'm going to position them on here. I like how that looks right about there. And I'm going to repeat the same process and stitch these little cheek pieces onto the head. So thread your yarn tail onto your yarn needle. You can probably move one of these for now. I'm going to hold this in place, and I'm going to go down through the muzzle piece underneath the 2 loops there through the back of the head. I'm going to come up back through the bottom and underneath the next set of stitches, the next set of loops, and just continue on around while you're holding it in place so it stays where you want it to stay. Once you have one completely attached, you can weave in the end of that yarn tail you've been working with and cut off that strand so that you have one less to get in your way. And you line up muzzle piece number 2, overlapping a little bit over the first one, and repeat the process. The final step before we attach the head to the blanket is to embroider on some features. So I'm going to put on some whiskers with some black yarn. I'm going to just put those over here. I'm going to do 3 of them. I kind of start more toward the middle, come up through the bottom. I am going to leave this tail here so that I can tie a knot in it later. And let's see, I'm going to go over here to the right. I'm going to come back up close to where I just was, but a little bit down. I'm going to go over straight over to the right. and a little bit farther down, but toward the middle, and then over here and a little down on the right. So there's my whiskers on one side. I'm just gonna carry this yarn along the back because it's going to be stitched down. You're not gonna see it. And I'm gonna repeat the process for the left side. Once I have the whiskers on, I am going to tie my two ends, my starting and my finishing end. I'm not gonna weave in these ends because it's hard to weave them into the ivory yarn without it showing. So I'm just gonna leave myself a little bit of a tail there. And when I sew it down, I'm just gonna make sure those are in the back. I'm gonna add our eyes. I'm going to put one eye right here and one eye right here. And I'm gonna put them sort of like, you know, the cat is smiling, so they're kind of squint shut. It's gonna be a little triangle. You could also use the same eyes from the cow pattern, which are just circle eyes, and that pattern is available for free. And I'll put a link somewhere so that you can find the cow pattern if you wanted to use those eyes instead. I came up through the bottom and I'm going down over here, and now I'm gonna come up through the bottom, maybe here. Let's see how that looks. And then back down through the same spot at the top. And there's one little squinty eye, one little I'm smiling so hard I'm squinting sort of eye. And I'm just gonna move over and just carry my yarn across the back, because once again, you're not gonna see this at all. It's gonna be stitched down. And now I've got my yarn tails all mixed up. Oh my goodness, okay. Go down. And then I'm gonna move over a little bit to the left and come up through the bottom and back down through that same stitch that I put my first side to. And there we go, two little squinty happy eyes. And this is a mess back here, but I am going to tie these just like I've tied the other ones so that they aren't going to come out. Don't pull too tight, and just cut myself some tiny little tails so that it doesn't unravel. So at this point, I'm ready to stitch the whole cat down onto my blanket block. Here's what I've got for a little block. Here's my happy little cow from last month. These are the eyes that you could also stitch onto the front of the cat. I like to attach my blanket blocks together before I stitch on any of the animals, because I think it's cute if they're gripping the frame here that's created by the white join. And you could put your cat straight up and down like this. I like to put some of them in the corner like this so that they're angled this way. You could put it over here. That looks a little crowded, so I'm not really advising that. You could put it up at the top, wherever you think looks cute. I'm gonna put mine down here in this corner, kind of angled out so it's not straight up and down. So once you figure out where you want to put it, I'm going to start with the ivory yarn. That's the piece of yarn tail you still have left over from the head. And I'm going to repeat the same process I did before. I'm going to be going counterclockwise. It really doesn't matter which way you go, but I'm going to go down underneath the loops of the head through the yarn block itself. I'm going to pull my yarn through. I'm going to move over a stitch and come up through the new stitch and the back of the blanket. I'm just going to continue on around through all of the ivory pieces of the head. When I come to the section where the black ear is, I'm going to go down through still an ivory portion of the head. I'm going to weave this tail down through the back until I'm about over here where I can come back up by this section of ivory. And you're not going to see that. See, we've woven it under, and I'm going to come back up and I'm going to continue sewing on the ivory portion of the head. I'm going to come back to do this ear. When you get to the brown latte ear part, I started sewing right over here. So this is the last section I have left. But these little stitches where you can see the latte yarn, because I attached it to the ivory head, I'm going to go right on top of those so that I can cover up that little bit of brown. I'm going to come up right next to where that is, and I'm going to go down just to the other side of it. And that's going to camouflage a lot of that. There's just a tiny bit left, but it does hide most of it. Once I've got all of the ivory sewn on, I'm gonna leave one of the stitches near the back. And I'm gonna weave in this end. Sometimes I like to knot it too, just for a little extra security. So I go under a couple stitches and then go back through the loop that I haven't pulled through yet and knot it in place. And then weave in that end so it's out of my way. So at this point, this is all attached, but the ears are kind of loose. So I'm just going to take the yarn tails left over from stitching the ears onto the head, and I'm going to go all the way around. So I'm going to stitch through the head portion and then go up the ear, down the other side with my black so it blends completely in. Once you get it all stitched down, you can knot it on the back, much the same as you did with the ivory. So you go through, and then this loop that you haven't finished pulling through, I'm gonna go back through that and then just weave in this yarn tail. I will say that you can see where we've stitched the head onto the back of the blanket. I think that's perfectly okay. I have blankets like that. I think it looks great. I am going to show you in November how to cover the entire back of the blanket with a piece of fabric so that you wouldn't see any of this, and it makes the blanket really heavy and warm. But you can just leave it like this, and I think it looks perfectly fine. Now the only thing left to sew on is the little latte colored ear, and I'm going to repeat the same process where I'm going to go back through. This part is already stitched down, but I am going to go around the ear itself with my latte yarn end so that the ear is affixed to the blanket as well. Next up are the little paws. I'm going to put these right down here in the corner at the edge of the blanket. I am going to add a border to this at the end, so there will be a little more blanket, but for right now I'm going to just stitch these right here at the bottom in this corner, just like I have the other pieces. I did leave a little bit of overhang with this paw. I think it's going to be really cute to attach it later onto my border. Obviously, that's all your preference, however you want to do it. The only thing left to do is to put on a tiny little nose. So I'm using some pink felt, and I'm just going to cut a little triangle out with my scissors. Sometimes this takes me a few tries, so we'll see. Once you have a triangle that you think looks like the right size, I'm just going to hot glue that in place. A little bit of hot glue and she's done. Just try not to burn yourself because it's such a small little piece. I almost forgot to add the mouth for some reason. You could put the mouth on before you stitch the head on. I'm obviously going to do it now after I stitch it down because for some reason I did not remember to do it. So I'm just going to come up through the bottom, right here in the middle between the two muzzle cheek things, leave myself a little bit of a tail at the back so I can knot it. I just come down here, about level with where the bottom of the muzzle is, like that. And then I'm gonna have a smile because I like my animals to be happy. So I'm just gonna go from the right over here to the left. Not pull too hard because it will make it straighter. And then I'm gonna come over to the left and add the smile right down in that same stitch. Oops. And pull it. You can play with it a little, but that's how I plan to leave my smile. Whether you're putting this little cutie on the Cuddle Buddies Baby Blanket or something else, I hope you really enjoy crocheting him. Happy crafting!